There is a concerning trend in web design that seems to have absolutely taken off, especially on platforms like Squarespace and Showit. Squarespace started us off with that perpetually spinning badge in the corner at the top of websites. Showit took us a step further and brought back the good old marquee. We did it, guys. The marquee is back. And it's now even gotten into email. Now, not only does this email have the spinning badge at the top, but at the bottom of the email, we've got our scrolling marquee. Yay! Now, of course, I'm being sarcastic, but to be clear, I am not calling out anyone for the purpose of shaming. I am simply showing examples of this trend and will hopefully provide a learning opportunity for you to take these examples, take what I tell you, and bring it back with you. This is along the lines of what happened in a Facebook group that I'm in. Somebody needed feedback on a website they were going to launch, and the site that they gave had side-scrolling text on it. And so I asked why, and did end up offering some information about the old HTML element, which still has the same issues as it does today. And they made sure to make it clear that I knew that they were not using that old element. This is totally new, CSS, not even JavaScript, which is fine. I brought up some neurodivergent issues like attention spans, and they said they didn't have a problem with it. They're neurodivergent. An issue for one does not mean an issue for all. The goal of accessibility is to get your site to work for as many people as possible. Make it usable. Is there a good reason for something? And is it something that we're able to adjust for accessibility? So some reasons they had given were trying to keep up with the latest web design trends. They liked it because it dragged their attention. Someone else on the post said that they keep adding them to client sites, who then keep asking them to take it off, and that one day someone will let them keep it, which at least gives me hope that the people keep asking her to remove it. If everyone keeps asking you to get rid of it on their site, it could be time to examine the purpose of this element rather than to try to keep pushing it on people because you like it. Put it on your project site, do something fun with it that only you and a few people will see. But when it comes to making sites for people, when it comes to making your own site, do things that are going to be accessible for as many people as possible. Then there was a developer who created a code example that made the CSS marquee cleaner on the edges. And I answered with kind of a sassy, the best thing about a marquee is when it doesn't exist. And they asked why, of course, and I gave them an overview, which we're going to go over in a bit. And he said, yeah, I don't care about any of these things. They just wanted to show this masking trick, basically, and you can use it in a bunch of different ways. And the problem with that kind of attitude, it's a perfectly fine argument, right? It's not a production code. It's not meant to do anything other than prove some kind of use case or, give something that can improve on a thing, right? So it's not like we're taking this and inserting it right into a website. It's a fine argument. But the problem with immediately sort of dismissing the accessibility issue is if it's something that can be used for other things and you find that there's an issue with this example that you've given, maybe adjust your example to use one of the other use cases that you have, right? So there's no reason to outright dismiss accessibility just because it's like a demo thing. Change up your demo use case for something that isn't sort of endorsing this should only be used sparingly, if at all, thing. Is it effective? What is this marquee bringing to your site besides motion, for the sake of motion? It's the text or images or whatever you have in this marquee. It's not going to be consumed in its entirety. Even if the text is really small and it's repeated, it's probably not going to be even read at all. maybe just glanced at. There's going to be issues with screen readers and comprehension. So nothing important should be going in these marquees. But it was something that I was curious about. Do people even like this marquee? Is it something that gets added because you think it's something that people are going to enjoy and find playful and whimsical, and nobody actually likes it, nobody wants it? Or are there people out there that do actually, in fact, like it? And then tell me more, right? So the answer to my audience was a resounding no. My audience is skewed. I got minimal response to my polls. It's not exactly scientific, but from what I did receive, 8 people on my LinkedIn really don't like them, with one person saying they love them and one person saying they don't have strong feelings either way. And then you have all 5 people on my Twitter that answered really don't like them. I would love to do more, data gathering on stuff like this, on many other things. I'd love for somebody to run a comprehensive, data collection on, do people like this, or is it something that designers and marketers and, people, is it sort of like the next slider, right? Is it something where we're trying to improve something without thinking it through? Is it something that we think is helpful and fun, but really most people don't even want it there? So I think more research is obviously needed on the topic, but from what I've gathered, nobody really likes it. They're distracting. They're difficult to read. The speed can't be controlled by the person reading it. It's essentially useless when it comes to being something that should actually be consumed for any kind of practical purposes. It's purely a fancy, pretty thing to stick on a page. Don't put your hours. Don't put when you're going to be closed. Don't put, important information. This should purely be an additional thing that you're putting on the page, if you put it on the page at all. So just to reference here, I do have the site that I had sent the people in the Facebook group I was talking about. It talks about that marquee element, but all of the reasons why it matters are still relevant for this new CSS / maybe JavaScript method. Moving text, as it says here, can be distracting, especially for people with attention deficits or cognitive disabilities. Moving text can also be difficult to read, especially for people with low vision or reading disabilities. A UI control that moves can be difficult to activate, especially for people with limited dexterity. And that, to me, in this case, seems to be referencing if you were to have a link in the marquee, which you're thinking, why would you do that? It's a scrolling text. You can't click it. Well, I happen to have an example of that, which I'll go over in a minute. But for instance, I often follow where I'm reading on the page with either my mouse or by scrolling the page up. And that's impossible to do with an unpausable, automatically scrolling text. And there's also the option to pause on hover, right? That means I have to move my mouse over it while I'm scrolling and reading. It just sort of gets complicated when I'm reading on a page. And so I typically will just try to scroll away from it as fast as possible. So not only is it something that I don't like, but it's something that actually hinders my ability to use a website. And then if you were to add that link inside of your marquee, your scrolling text, I have to put my mouse over it. Hopefully it pauses. It doesn't always. And then I have to travel my mouse along that defined path that you've given me. And hopefully it's big enough to where I don't accidentally move off of it so that it unpauses and I have to pause it again. It's just sort of this very hard to do thing for something that's supposed to, add a little bit of lightheartedness, where all it's doing is adding in a bunch of frustration. And as an example of that, I have a site that I took from this, the AWWawards.com site, that on its text marquee effect highlight page, they have their own marquee where it's, like I said, has a really short text that repeats over and over and over again. And And then they have just so many examples of sites doing this. And this is one of them, right? So this site does not take into consideration my settings. Now, as a warning, it's going to spin. This does not remove its animation when I have my reduce motion settings on. That is the bare minimum that you should be doing with a marquee. If I tell my computer reduce motion, this marquee should not be spinning at all. And in fact, if you have text that is longer than a couple of words, it should expand to display the full text of it. So I can still consume the content that you're giving, that you're providing. So if I take my tab button key and I bring it all the way down the page, they have a marquee at the bottom of their page. And it's going to move kind of fast. If I hover my mouse, it does pause at least. But you can see if I'm tabbing, it's not pausing. It's just moving. And so I don't get that benefit of pausing it at the right time. And I happen to have my browser at a size in which it sort of lets me read the whole thing if I piece it together. But if my browser were any smaller, I wouldn't be able to read this all at once. I would have to literally sit here and read it, hopefully at the speed at which it is moving. Hopefully I can read fast enough. Now, if I remove my mouse again, you'll see this focus that I have here. It's actually moving. There are multiple statements here, and it jumps from one to another. And the weirdest part about this is if I hit the tab key, I still have to tab through the 3 email me's that are here. And because I'm interacting with this in a way that was not anticipated, that was not sort of the primary user case for this, it creates a little bit of a jump, a little bit of a bug at the end of it. Whereas if I hadn't tabbed down to this, this would just scroll around without having this blank space here where it then adds it in. This actually works totally fine if I don't have the tab that I've, brought to the bottom of the page here. So it brings in this unintended, buggy experience because I'm not using a mouse. Or I'm using a mouse and, tabbing down. So there's a lot that you have to consider, that you have to test, that just might not work as intended. Now, in this next sort of example that I have here, this is something I came across that actually takes accessibility into consideration. And so it goes into information about using aria-hidden equals true. As you'll see in a minute, it goes through an example that has like images, a row of images at the top, it has text in the middle, and then a row of images at the bottom. And that second row of images is actually a repeated group of images, just in a different order, scrolling in the opposite direction. And so it does hide duplicate content, but it's still inconvenient, right? It's still, I have to scroll past it if I don't want to see the scrolling text. But screen readers can't just skip over a marquee as easily as I can. It's not like a list or a navigation or something that sort of has this built-in, I'm going to skip over this. You have to get through the whole thing. So if you're adding in so many images or so many things, you still have to treat that as if it's all content on the page at once, right? So if you have 12 images in this marquee that's scrolling by, you have to pretend from a screen reader perspective that all these images are on the page all at one time. Now, this example does respect the prefers reduced motion CSS media query. That is the bare minimum that you should be doing on a marquee. If I tell my computer, I don't want motion, reduce as much motion as you can, it should respect that. And this marquee should not rotate. In fact, you should probably create some kind of alternative experience that is not going to cut off text at awkward places. It's just going to provide me a similar experience. But ideally, it would also provide somebody who doesn't necessarily need a fully reduced motion setting turned on, but still would like to not have this be so distracting. It's pulling my focus, like the person from the Facebook group said, but not in a good way, right? I can't focus on the rest of the page that you have if there's also content that I'm seeing. You need some kind of pause button, or like stop this content and expand it or something. You need some kind of consideration for the rest of the people. It's one of the more accessible examples that I found, but it doesn't go all the way. There's still those few things that I mentioned that are missing. Because I personally find marquees either distracting or dizzying or both, depending on the type of day I'm having, what I'm doing, how long I've been on the computer already that day, and the I'm adding it because I like it reason for adding that side scroll seems like it's just not taking into consideration the issues that it does cause and the discomfort that I know people feel when that animation is just constantly moving without a way to stop it or pause it. And then not to mention the WCAG requirements around motion, going on for longer than a few seconds. All of those things compel me to find more creative ways to bring motion and intrigue to a website. I love adding animation to a page in ways that make sense, that enhance the user experience, that provide feedback, that have purpose. I'd rather take what is happening in this perpetual motion on the page and come up with a more creative and less invasive way to infuse personality and creativity onto the page. Every site that I tested that had a marquee wasn't accessible for reasons beyond the marquee. Some sites it was impossible to even test the marquee because the rest of the site just made it hard to do so. So my advice before adding a marquee element to the page is to focus on the accessibility of the rest of the page and the rest of your site. Then down the line, the idea of a marquee can be revisited when you have the resources to devote to researching its effectiveness, the best way to implement it, all the considerations you need to make it accessible. Unless you're committed to getting it right and have a really good reason to use it instead of designing a more user-friendly way to convey your information, this marquee trend definitely falls into the category of avoid. The marquee HTML element was deprecated, and it should stay in the past where it belongs.